Nayato Watari was a shy and awkward 16-year-old boy who cared deeply, maybe too deeply, about his little sister, Suzu. Ever since their parents died 2 years ago, Nayato had taken on the role of both brother and parent. The two of them had been passed from one relative to another, never staying in one place for long. Recently, they moved in with their aunt, Tameo, a strange woman who lived in a quiet house on the outskirts of Tokyo. One morning on the way to school, Nayato passed through a sunflower field and locked eyes with a girl who looked strangely familiar. It reminded him of his childhood, when he and a girl once played in a garden that she later destroyed before disappearing without saying goodbye. At school, a classmate asked if Nayato wanted to join a club. As always, he politely said no. He had to take care of his little sister. His classmate muttered that Nayato always used that as an excuse. Then Toki, another classmate, approached him with an idea about joining a casual group, but Nayato gave the same answer. Toki respected him for being such a caring brother and said he was also really close with his grandfather. Nayato was glad that Toki didn't tease him like others, calling him sister-obsessed. Then a cheerful and beautiful girl named Yukari invited Nayato to a meeting about building a flower bed. Nervous, Nayato gave his usual excuse about watching Suzu. Still, Yukari offered to drop off notes at his house, since they lived nearby. Before leaving, she affectionately called him little brother, making his heart race. At home that evening, Nayato cooked dinner for Suzu and asked how old she had turned last month. 10, she shouted happily. Later, as he washed the dishes, Aunt Tameo arrived and teased him for looking like his father. She handed him an envelope with a large allowance and told him to buy something nice for Suzu's birthday. Then, oddly, she joked that giving him money felt like giving it to her big brother. Nayato found her behavior strange. She never left the house and always stayed locked in her room. The next morning, Suzu asked him for help with her hair. Nayato said she should learn to do things herself, but Suzu insisted that he always take care of her. They were all each other had left. As he walked her to school, she pointed out some soybean plants, the same kind their mother once grew. When he asked what she wanted for her birthday, she smiled brightly. She was excited he hadn't forgotten. As they walked, a blonde girl wearing the same school uniform followed behind. Later at school, Toki joked about Yukari being out of Nayato's league. She had even rejected a modeling scout. Then he mentioned a new student, Takabana Satsuki. Hearing that name made Nayato freeze. After school, the same blonde girl from earlier called his name. Her voice sent chills down his spine. He tried to ignore her, but she chased after him. Annoyed, he demanded to know what the garden destroyer wanted. She smiled and introduced herself, Satsuki. They hadn't seen each other in 6 years. Nayato told her he hadn't forgiven her for ruining the garden. She apologized, but only for her to follow him. She said she had something important to say, but he tried to escape. When she finally let go, he ran for his life. A few blocks away, he picked up Suzu and rushed home, not wanting to be caught. At home, Suzu asked who the girl was, but Nayato just said it was no one. Then Suzu told him what she really wanted for her birthday, a garden where they could grow vegetables together. Embarrassed, Nayato tried to explain they had no space, but Suzu said he could just buy land. Suddenly, Aunt Tameo popped out of nowhere and offered her unused backyard for the garden. Nayato checked it out. It was wild and overgrown, but he agreed to try for Suzu's sake. As he looked around, Satsuki jumped out holding a gardening hoe, scaring him half to death. Nayato was shocked. He asked what she doing in the backyard. She said she had remembered something she needed to tell him. But Nayato was annoyed. He didn't understand on why she kept following him. All he wanted was to finally start a peaceful life with Suzu. Satsuki, though, insisted he had misunderstood everything. When words didn't work, she acted instead. She suddenly pulled him in and kissed him full on. At that exact moment, Ishihara peeked into the backyard and saw Nayato and Satsuki kissing on the ground like a scene from a drama. And Satsuki didn't stop there. She kept kissing him over and over. And truthfully, Nayato wasn't sure he hated it. He woke up later in bed, confused. Aunt Tameo stormed in, calling him a pervert, and warned him not to mess around in her yard again. The next morning, Nayato tried to tell Suzu that nothing was going on with the blonde girl. But Suzu, clearly jealous, ignored him and ran off to work on the garden by herself. Nayato wondered why Suzu didn't remember Satsuki at all. At school, Yukari wondered if she had really seen Nayato kissing Satsuki. When Nayato showed up and apologized for missing the meeting, Yukari seemed distant. Just then, Satsuki appeared, cheerful as ever, teasing Nayato about his interest in girls with certain features, clearly referring to Yukari. Embarrassed, Nayato dragged Satsuki away. On the balcony, she returned the gardening hoe she had borrowed 6 years ago. She reminded him of the times they spent in Shinshu, how they became close friends after he offered her a tomato. His mom once said the girl had a crush on him, but then she destroyed the garden and vanished. In the present, Nayato asked her why. She still refused to explain but said she wanted to truly apologize. She even suggested he could punish her in a naughty way, but Nayato yelled at her to stop messing around. Feeling guilty, she left. Later, Toki asked Nayato to help with something. On the way home, Nayato noticed Yukari avoiding him. She used to be his comfort in high school, but now everything felt messy. Then Satsuki showed up carrying Suzu, who had hurt her knee. Nayato panicked and grabbed his hoe, but Suzu explained that Satsuki had only helped her and even joined in the garden work. Suzu said she remembered Satsuki from their old house in Shinshu and didn't mind them being friends. That evening, Satsuki walked home with them. She claimed that the garden in Shinshu had actually belonged to her before the Wataris moved in. Before she could explain more, Yukari showed up and asked to talk alone. The next day, she and Nayato met at the supermarket to buy supplies for the school garden. Suzu and Satsuki stayed behind to take care of their own garden. At the store, Yukari asked if Nayato was dating Satsuki. He said no and tried to confess his feelings, but couldn't. As they left the store, Suzu suddenly appeared, clearly upset. Seeing her big brother with another girl, she became jealous and started scolding him. To calm her down, Nayato gave her a special gift, a blue gardening hoe he picked out just for her. He knew Suzu didn't like pink or anything too girly. While they were talking, Satsuki quietly slipped away without saying anything. Then, out of nowhere, Yukari blurted out that she loved Nayato. She said it was because of how kind he was to his sister. Realizing what she'd said, she panicked and tried to take it back. But she was so embarrassed, she ended up running away. Suzu looked around and asked where Satsuki had gone. Back home, Suzu proudly showed off her new hoe to Aunt Tamo. Meanwhile, Nayato stepped outside, wondering if Satsuki had somehow wandered into the backyard again. Sure enough, he saw a flash of blonde hair in the garden, just like that summer 6 years ago. Satsuki welcomed him back and asked how his date went. Nayato explained, awkwardly, that he was only with Ishihara because the rest of the group didn't show up. Satsuki laughed and said she wanted to go on a date too, but quickly brushed it off as a joke. Still, Nayato told himself not to fall for her tricks again. He didn't want to feel the same hurt he felt when she left years ago. Looking at the yard, he noticed it was strangely clean. Satsuki casually said she had kept her promise, not by pulling out all the weeds, but by digging everything up all at once. Without warning, she started taking off her sweaty clothes right there in the yard. Nayato quickly stopped her just in time. But then, as always, Aunt Tameo opened the door at the worst possible moment. Seeing the two of them like that, Aunt Tameo lost her temper. She shouted at Nayato, gave him a harsh scolding, and hit him with full force, making it very clear she was done putting up with any of this nonsense in her house. After Aunt Tameo stormed off, Nayato and Satsuki stood up and quietly moved away from each other. The whole situation left Nayato feeling uneasy. To clear his head, he decided to take Suzu for a walk and told Satsuki to go home. But instead of leaving, Satsuki followed closely behind them, saying her house was in the same direction. As they walked, Satsuki casually asked if they were moving again. Nayato, surprised she noticed, admitted that they might. He said he was hoping he and Suzu could finally settle down somewhere for a while. When he told her that his personal life wasn't her concern, Satsuki grabbed his tie and made him face her. Calmly, she said she already knew what had happened to his family. Though it made him uncomfortable, Nayato started to open up. As the sun went down, he told her about how he and Suzu ended up living with Aunt Tameo. Their parents' marriage was never accepted by either side of the family, and after they died, no one really wanted to take them in. They had been passed around from one reluctant relative to another until they ended up with Tameo. Satsuki interrupted, saying that maybe Tameo cared more than she showed. After all, she let them use her backyard to start a garden. Then Satsuki pulled out a few seed packets and handed them to Nayato. Before leaving, she told him that if he and Suzu ever got kicked out, they could come live with her instead. Later that evening, Suzu woke up and realized Tameo was still upset, especially since Nayato hadn't come home yet. She held Nayato's hand and made him promise that wherever he went, he would always take her with him. Meanwhile, Tameo had just finished her shower and was looking for her glasses, only to find her cat had run off with them. While chasing the cat, she accidentally ran into Nayato, who had just come home to apologize. Embarrassed, she ran back into the bathroom. From outside the door, Nayato got on his knees and begged her to let them stay a little longer so he and Suzu could finish the garden. He said it would take time before the vegetables could grow, and he wanted to stay at least long enough to see it happen. Tameo suddenly opened the door, now fully dressed, and asked for her glasses. After putting them on, she bluntly asked if Satsuki was his girlfriend. Nayato quickly said no, she was just a childhood friend. He also added that he had no plans to start any relationship because his only focus was Suzu. Just then, Suzu came into the room and asked if Nayato was done apologizing. Tameo looked at her and told Nayato that if he really cared about Suzu, he should focus on the garden instead of messing around with girls. Nayato smiled. Those words made it clear they were allowed to stay. Excited, Suzu asked if Tamayo would help them with the garden. Tamayo refused, saying she had no plans to do any hard work. Nayato found that odd, remembering how their father once said he and Tamayo used to garden together. At the mention of her brother, Tamayo's mood changed completely. She snapped at him, warning him never to bring up her brother again. Both Nayato and Suzu were left wondering what happened between her and their father. The next day, Satsuki joined them on the walk to school. Suzu happily talked to her about everything that had happened, while Nayato silently questioned why Satsuki kept tagging along. Satsuki noticed his gaze and playfully teased him, making the morning feel lighthearted and peaceful for all three of them. A few days later, the seeds they planted started to sprout. Nayato explained that they were growing a special type of radish that would be ready in about 20 days. Then he brought up a more serious topic. He had found Suzu's test results on her desk and was worried about her grades going down. Suzu suggested he tutor her. With no other choice, Nayato agreed, but not before scolding her a little and reminding her that she needed to learn to be more independent. She didn't seem to take it seriously and clung to him, saying he would always be there to take care of her. At school, Nayato remembered that midterms were coming up. Yukari offered to study with him, but he turned her down, thinking he might slow her down. She kindly asked him to at least think about it and then walked off with her friend. Nayato tried not to overthink it, but his friend Toki teased him about how close Yukari had been lately. Nayato insisted she was just being polite, but his red face gave him away. After Toki left, Nayato's smile faded. He knew Suzu might not be happy if he spent time alone with Yukari. That afternoon, it started pouring rain. Nayato didn't have an umbrella and watched as everyone else left school. Just then, Satsuki showed up and handed him an extra umbrella. When he asked why she hadn't walked with them that morning, she joked that she didn't want to interrupt his time with Suzu and had followed them from 5 meters behind. She teased him about sharing an umbrella, not realizing that Yukari was secretly watching from behind the lockers. Toki also saw everything. Back home, Nayato started to panic, realizing Suzu might have gotten stuck at school without an umbrella. He looked around her room for a raincoat, but instead found a crumpled-up test paper in her closet with a perfect score. He was confused. Why would she hide something like that? Before he could think more, Suzu walked in. Startled, Nayato quickly stuffed the paper into his pocket. Suzu casually said she had walked a classmate home because he forgot his umbrella. Nayato's expression changed and his voice grew sharp. Suzu noticed and asked what was wrong, but he brushed it off and quickly left the room. Out in the rain, Nayato felt guilty. He hadn't praised Suzu for her perfect score or her kindness. He realized he had always thought of her as someone who needed him for everything. But maybe she was becoming more independent, and that made him feel strange. Then he saw Satsuki, soaked from the rain. He realized she had lied. She only had one umbrella and gave it to him. He felt worse, like everyone was hiding things from him. Maybe even Suzu had been pretending to be helpless so he could feel needed. Satsuki noticed his troubled expression and gently reached out. Nayato said he was fine, but noticed she was still soaking wet. Quietly, he took off his jacket and placed it over her shoulders. He walked her to a rundown apartment nearby and was surprised that she lived so close. When she tried to open the door, the knob fell off. Nayato wondered what kind of parents left her in a place like that. Satsuki told him to go home and warm up, but when he didn't move, she pulled him inside. Nayato hesitated, saying he had to return to Suzu. But Satsuki said Suzu was old enough to be alone. Then she accused him of always ignoring his own feelings and building his whole life around Suzu's needs. Nayato lost his temper. He grabbed Satsuki by the shoulders and pushed her against the wall, yelling at her for saying things she didn't understand. Her silence hurt more than he expected. He turned away and muttered that she would never understand his bond with Suzu. Then he left, leaving Satsuki standing alone. As he walked in the rain, she sat down on the floor, blushing and whispering that she did understand him. Nayato kept walking, thinking deeply. Maybe it was time to stop living only for Suzu. Maybe then he could finally start thinking about Yukari. When he got home, Suzu ran to him, blaming herself for what had happened earlier. Nayato gently calmed her down and gave her sweets to make her feel better. He promised to come home earlier next time. Suzu teared up and reminded him about his promise to tutor her, saying she wasn't smart like other kids. That's when Nayato pulled out the perfect test paper. Suzu's face changed. She grabbed the paper, crumpled it again, and threw it away. Nayato picked it up and told her she didn't need help with math. But Suzu insisted that the score was a one-time thing. She still needed him for everything else. Before Nayato could answer, the room started spinning. His legs gave out and he collapsed. Suzu panicked and ran to call Aunt Tamayo. The next day, word spread at school that Nayato was absent. At home, Suzu refused to leave his side, even though Nayato warned she might get sick too. He kept trying to convince her to go to school, and eventually she agreed. By noon, Nayato woke up and sensed something was off. Sure enough, Satsuki was lying in bed right next to him, staring like nothing was strange. He tried to scold her, asking how she even got inside, but she ignored the question and apologized for getting him sick. She offered him medicine, but it turned out to be a children's suppository. Nayato stared at it in horror, shocked that she remembered such a weird detail about him. She explained it was the kind his mother used to give him. He told her to go to school, but she calmly said school only had morning classes and it was already past noon. She also mentioned trying several ways to wake him up, teasingly hinting they were unusual. Before he could respond, the doorbell rang. Nayato struggled to his feet and opened the door to find Yukari looking worried. Even though he was stressed, he let her inside. She asked to use the kitchen to make him something warm, and he agreed. The moment Yukari left to cook, Satsuki got up and said she would go. She didn't like seeing him with Yukari. But before she left, she sat on top of him and joked that maybe he wanted her to stay. Just then, Yukari called from outside the door saying lunch was ready. Panicking, Nayato quickly pulled Satsuki under the blanket and dove in after her. Yukari came into the room with a warm smile, placing a bowl of food beside him, completely unaware of the blushing Satsuki hidden under the covers. Nayato lay frozen, heart racing, wondering how he would get out of this mess. Nayato still couldn't believe he had agreed to this. Hiding under the blanket had been Satsuki's idea. Somehow, in her mind, it had seemed like a perfectly normal thing to do. Things only got worse when Yukari, who had come to visit, noticed a box of suppositories lying nearby. Nayato panicked and quickly blurted out that they were Satsuki's, trying to sound casual about it. Meanwhile, under the blanket, Satsuki was squirming to get comfortable. She didn't seem embarrassed at all. In fact, she held Nayato tightly, clearly enjoying the situation. Nayato, on the other hand, was sweating nervously and praying Yukari wouldn't notice anything weird. Yukari leaned in to check his forehead. She thought he might still have a fever, but thankfully didn't realize why he was actually heating up. She kindly reminded him to eat and drink water before heading out, finally giving Nayato some relief. As soon as Yukari left, Satsuki stretched under the blanket and smiled proudly, like she had won something. Nayato just sat there, frozen, still shaken from the whole experience. Later, on her way home, Yukari started to feel uneasy. She had visited Nayato to check on him, but Satsuki had clearly been there before her. Yukari told herself it was fine. Nayato had said they were just childhood friends. Still, something about it didn't sit right with her. She paused by a small shrine and prayed silently for Nayato's health. Back at home, Nayato had changed into fresh clothes. He sat down and opened the food Yukari had made for him earlier. Wanting to feel thankful, he took a big spoonful, only to instantly regret it. The rice was overcooked and had a strange metallic taste. Even so, he kept eating. It was from Yukari after all. Outside, in the garden, Satsuki was taking care of the plants while Suzu watched. After a while, Satsuki called Suzu over to help. As they worked together, Suzu started talking about how worried she was about Nayato. While they chatted, Suzu accidentally pulled out a basil plant, thinking it was a weed. It had grown too close to the tomatoes. Satsuki gently corrected her, explaining that basil and tomatoes are actually companion plants. They help each other grow and protect one another from bugs. Suzu listened quietly, thinking deeply about what Satsuki said. Then, out of nowhere, Suzu asked Satsuki about something from the past. She remembered that years ago, Satsuki had ruined their garden. Nayato had been very upset, and Suzu had even tried to chase after Satsuki to ask why. But she had stopped when she saw Satsuki talking to a strange man before disappearing. Suzu asked who the man was, but Satsuki said there had been no one with her. She quickly changed the subject and asked if Suzu had ever told Nayato about that day. Then she admitted she had destroyed the garden because she was angry. She and Nayato had argued, and she had acted out. She said it was something she truly regretted. Suzu suddenly remembered how she and Nayato had cleaned up the garden afterward. She had planned to tell him everything about what happened. But when the chance came, she didn't. Instead, she used the situation to get closer to her brother. She wanted to be someone he could rely on and share something special with him. The next morning, Suzu was surprised to see Nayato already up and dressed. He said he was feeling much better and joked that Yukari's porridge had cured him, though honestly, he couldn't remember much after eating it. Nayato also noticed that Suzu had gotten ready for school all by herself. She said she wanted to be a little more independent now, but she added that she still wanted to depend on him for some things. At school, Nayato wanted to thank Yukari properly, but she was always busy or surrounded by classmates. Some guys warned Nayato not to get his hopes up. They said Yukari was polite but distant, and no one had ever gotten close to her. Toki joined in and mentioned that he and Yukari had known each other since childhood. He said that Yukari always ended up in strange situations, even though she seemed calm and quiet. Nayato realized that being beautiful probably came with its own problems, Later on his way home, Nayato saw Yukari turning down a group of boys who had confessed their feelings, but she noticed Nayato watching and walked over at him. He finally got a chance to thank her for visiting him when he was sick. Just as he was about to leave, Yukari surprised him by inviting him to a study session. They found a quiet corner in the library and began to study together. After a while, Nayato asked her something that had been bothering him. He wanted to know why Yukari was being so nice to him. Yukari smiled and said part of it was because he was a transfer student. That made Nayato feel a bit disappointed. But then Yukari added there was another reason. She said they had actually met once before he transferred to the school. Back then, Yukari had stayed late at school for her club duties. Wanting to change out of her uniform, she had gone into an empty classroom. Just then, Nayato had suddenly burst in, not noticing her state of dress, and had started asking questions. He was looking for Suzu and had been too focused to see anything else. Yukari said she never forgot that moment. Even though she had been caught off guard, she was surprised by how worried Nayato was for his sister. That memory stayed with her, even if he didn't remember it at all. Nayato felt terrible after hearing what Yukari had gone through. He didn't remember anything about it, but he admitted it probably happened. Yukari, her cheeks red, told him she admired how much he cared for Suzu. She said he felt different from the other boys, most only cared about girls for shallow reasons. She even mentioned the group of guys near the station she had rejected, calling them pushy and scary. That was why Nayato stood out. He was genuine and kind. Nayato suddenly felt a chill. Yukari looked like she wanted to say something more, but instead, she apologized for rambling and left. As she walked out of the library, she saw Satsuki standing nearby. Yukari wondered if Nayato and Satsuki had made plans to meet, but Satsuki casually said she was just waiting for him because she felt like it. Yukari nodded and walked off without saying anything else. Later, Nayato shared everything Yukari had told him with Toki while eating ramen. Nayato thought Yukari was just letting him down gently and didn't want him to see her in a romantic way. Toki disagreed and said it could mean something else, but Nayato didn't get the hint. He decided he would do his best to stay pure in Yukari's eyes so they could keep being friends. Suddenly, Satsuki appeared and said he shouldn't force himself and should just be his true self. That night, Nayato looked at the notes he and Yukari had written together and thought about her words. His classmates' teasing echoed in his mind. He tried to ignore it, but he couldn't stop imagining Yukari's face. Then Satsuki's face suddenly popped into his head, which made him feel even more confused. He remembered the blanket incident from the day before and thought how nice it would have been if Yukari had been there instead of Satsuki. Just then, he noticed Suzu, who had been sleeping next to him, wide awake and staring at him with an annoyed, disappointed glare. Nayato froze in panic and quickly said he needed to go to the bathroom. Meanwhile, Yukari was showering at her house, but her thoughts drifted back to what Satsuki had said. The way Satsuki acted so naturally around Nayato made her uneasy. Yukari wondered if she really was just a childhood friend to him or maybe something more. Still, she chose to believe in Nayato and told herself to be braver so she could confess her feelings someday. The next morning, Nayato was watering plants in the yard. He looked exhausted. Suzu, working on the vegetable patch, complained to Satsuki that Nayato had been acting weird since yesterday. Curious, Satsuki tried to talk to him, but when Nayato turned around, he accidentally sprayed her with cold water from the hose. Soaked, Satsuki sat on the ground while Nayato panicked and backed away, telling himself over and over not to look. At school later, Satsuki teased Nayato about his distracted behavior, saying it was probably Yukari related. She also mentioned that because Nayato had sprayed her with cold water that morning, she got soaked through her clothes. Nayato then realized what that might mean. She could be wearing nothing underneath at school. He panicked, but Satsuki just smiled and said she'd be fine. It was only exam day and all she needed to do was sit. Then Yukari showed up and greeted Nayato. He immediately tried to act normal and claimed he wasn't talking to Satsuki, but Satsuki had already left. Nayato kept glancing at her skirt nervously, which Yukari noticed. Wanting to get his attention, Yukari suddenly invited him to hang out after exams, and even said he could bring Suzu. Just then, a strong wind blew through the hallway and lifted a few girls' skirts. Without thinking, Nayato ran up and hugged Satsuki tightly to keep her skirt from flying up. Everyone stared. Yukari froze, thinking it looked like a bold, romantic move. Realizing what had happened, Nayato quickly let go and tried to explain, but it was too late. Yukari's face turned dark, and she rushed off without saying a word. Nayato dropped to the floor in despair, blaming Satsuki for ruining his moment with Yukari. Satsuki calmly explained she had borrowed some of Nayato's clothes, so he didn't need to worry. But she still thanked him for trying to protect her. Nayato felt even worse. A week passed, and Yukari barely spoke to him. Nayato complained about everything to Toki and Satsuki. That's when Toki revealed a new problem. There was now a rumor going around school that Nayato and Satsuki were dating. Nayato felt hopeless. He was supposed to have had fun with Yukari after exams, but everything had gone wrong. Seeing how upset he was, Toki came up with a plan. He announced that they were all going to the beach that weekend to cheer up. After school, Nayato was deep in thought. The upcoming beach trip with his class should have been exciting, but he felt uneasy. Things between him and Yukari were still awkward, and he didn't know how to act around her for 2 whole days. On top of that, he was worried about his little sister, Suzu. He hated the idea of leaving her alone. After thinking it over, Nayato decided to just bring Suzu along on the trip. That way, he wouldn't have to worry about her being lonely at home. But when he got back to the house, Suzu greeted him with unexpected news. She had her own school trip to the beach, and it was on the same weekend. She looked happy, but also a little sad that they wouldn't be together. Nayato, on the other hand, felt relieved. He smiled and told her it was great news. They both realized someone had to take care of their garden while they were away, so they agreed to ask their aunt, Tamio, for help. Before heading off to pack, Suzu asked Nayato to promise not to forget her during their time apart. He smiled and promised. Then, looking up at him, she asked him to take her shopping for a new swimsuit the next day. Nayato hesitated but eventually agreed. The next morning, he already regretted saying yes. Luckily, Satsuki offered to come with them, saying she needed a swimsuit too. Nayato didn't really enjoy the idea of shopping with her, but it still seemed better than going alone. As both of them walked through the hallway together, chatting and laughing, Yukari happened to spot them from across the locker. She paused, feeling a strange twist in her chest. Toki, who was standing nearby, noticed her expression and casually asked if she wanted to go talk to them. Yukari didn't respond right away. She had heard a rumor at school that Nayato and Satsuki were dating. She tried to ignore it, but seeing them together now made her doubt everything. Toki then asked if Nayato had ever said they were dating. Yukari shook her head. Toki reminded her not to trust gossip unless she heard it from Nayato himself. He also pointed out how Yukari used to be in middle school, brave and honest when confused. After thinking for a moment, Yukari nodded, thanked him, and ran to catch up with Nayato and the others. At the department store, Nayato was already overwhelmed by the large swimwear section. Satsuki and Suzu immediately split off to look at different suits. Soon both returned with revealing designs and asked Nayato what he thought. Embarrassed, he told them to just pick whatever they liked. Satsuki smirked and teased it by holding up an even bolder option. Suzu smiled shyly and asked if she looked cute, but Nayato quickly turned away, flustered, and went off to find his own beachwear. Nearby, Yukari had arrived but hesitated to approach them. Instead, she stayed out of sight and quietly observed. A friendly sales clerk asked if she needed help. Yukari nervously said she wanted something simple, but after seeing Satsuki's bold choices, she changed her mind. She asked for something revealing. The clerk, excited to help, handed her a 2-piece that fit perfectly. Yukari blushed and asked to see a different one. The clerk offered to help her find something better. Then, leaning in, the clerk asked if Yukari was shopping to impress someone. Yukari didn't answer, but her face gave it away. She described someone tall and serious, which made the clerk even more eager. The clerk even brought out clip and hair extensions to help Yukari look more mature. Soon, Yukari stood in front of the mirror wearing a flattering swimsuit and longer hair. She was surprised by how different she looked. At that moment, Nayato passed by, saw her, and didn't recognize her. He paused, confused, before walking away. Back in the changing area, Suzu called out for help with her straps. Nayato pulled open a curtain, thinking it was Suzu's booth. To his horror, it was Satsuki inside, and she had just stepped out of her swimsuit. They both froze. Then Satsuki yanked the curtain shut and screamed. Nayato stumbled back, quickly apologizing. Moments later, Suzu stepped out, smiling, unaware of what had just happened. Satsuki stormed out of the booth, red-faced and angry. Nayato followed her, trying to explain. He gently grabbed her wrist. She turned to him with a mix of anger and embarrassment and muttered softly that he was an idiot. Nayato was surprised. Satsuki usually didn't get flustered even when teasing him. He mentioned that. She looked away and said it felt different when it wasn't on purpose. Nearby, Yukari had finished her purchase and spotted the two of them talking. She hid behind a wall, not sure what she was feeling. She had seen enough for one day. On the train ride home, Satsuki sat across from Nayato and Suzu. She looked thoughtful and asked why he never spoke badly about her. If he did, people might stop misunderstanding their relationship. Nayato simply shrugged and said it was their problem, not anyone else's. Suzu, half asleep, murmured that she was thirsty. Then she turned to Satsuki and asked her to come sit beside them. Satsuki smiled and said it was okay. She would stay where she was and jump in if Nayato ever really needed her. Nayato wasn't sure what she meant, whether it was an apology or something more. Their relationship was complicated. They weren't exactly friends, but they weren't strangers either. They had once been very close, but something had gone wrong. He hadn't fully forgiven her yet, but part of him didn't want to let her go. When they got off the train, Yukari was waiting for them. She didn't hesitate and asked if Naoto and Satsuki were dating. Naoto tried to explain that they were just childhood friends, but Yukari didn't believe him. She brought up the time she saw them kiss in the garden. Naoto panicked. Satsuki stepped in and smiled calmly. She said it had just been a kiss. Then, without warning, she leaned forward and kissed Yukari lightly on the cheek. She explained that it didn't mean anything. She kissed people all the time, boys, girls, anyone. She admitted she had kissed Naoto too, but said it didn't mean anything romantic. Yukari still looked confused, but slowly nodded. Suzu tugged on Naoto's sleeve and asked for a drink, so they all headed to a vending machine. Yukari tried to calm down, telling herself the kiss didn't mean anything. Still, her heart was racing. As she turned to leave, Naoto called her name. He told her again that he and Satsuki were just old friends. Then he smiled and said he was really looking forward to the beach trip with her. Yukari blushed and softly replied that she was too. The next day at the beach, everyone was excited. Satsuki was amazed by the ocean. Naoto, however, kept sneaking glances at Yukari. In the changing room, Yukari's friends complimented her new look. Yukari blushed and looked down at her feet. She hoped Naoto would like it. Naoto stood under the shade, thinking about Suzu. He missed her already, but he also knew this trip was a chance to get closer to Yukari. As he looked around, he spotted her laughing with a group of classmates. He wanted to talk to her, but wasn't sure how. Just then, he noticed Satsuki arguing with a guy. One of their classmates explained that Satsuki had been getting hit on all morning. Naoto quickly walked over and grabbed her by the jacket, pulling her away. He tried to scold her, but she just smiled and asked what he thought of her swimsuit. Naoto looked away, flustered. She sighed and asked why he wasn't spending time with Yukari. When Naoto asked if she was planning to swim, Satsuki admitted she didn't know how. She had always skipped swim class. This was her first real beach trip. She had never even gone with her family. Naoto was surprised. Even after all these years, there were things he didn't know about her. Satsuki said she wanted to try swimming today. Naoto encouraged her, but warned her not to go alone. Just then, Toki walked up and handed Naoto a note from their group. It was a list of things to buy. He said Yukari would be joining him. Naoto took the note and walked off, not noticing the smile Satsuki gave him as she watched him go. When Naoto met Yukari at the shop, he was so nervous he could barely look her in the eye. Yukari misunderstood, thinking maybe he didn't like her swimsuit. To break the silence, Naoto unfolded the paper, but all it said was, "Go have lunch together." They both realized Toki had set them up. And for once, Naoto didn't mind at all. While Naoto and Yukari were off doing their errand, Satsuki and Toki ended up spending some time together by the beach. The others were playing or relaxing, but Satsuki stayed off to the side, quietly watching everything from a distance. She admitted to Toki that she didn't usually get along with other girls, which was why she preferred to keep to herself. Curious about her quiet attitude, Toki asked if she had feelings for Naoto. Satsuki didn't deny it. She admitted she liked him, but quickly added that she had no interest in being his girlfriend. Her feelings weren't about wanting to date him. They were something quieter, something she didn't expect anything from. Toki seemed satisfied with her answer. He told her that in that case, he continued to support Naoto and Yukari. He went on to say that he had also made a decision. He no longer wanted to pursue Yukari as a girlfriend. Whatever feelings he had were fading now, and he felt at peace with that. Meanwhile, Naoto and Yukari walked side by side through rows of colorful food stalls. The salty breeze from the sea mixed with the smell of grilled food and sweets. They wandered slowly, trying to decide what to eat. Naoto wondered aloud if Yukari might want something light and sweet, like shaved ice. Yukari smiled at the suggestion and joked about how it would probably dye her tongue a funny color. Then playfully, she stuck her tongue out, catching Naoto off guard. His heart skipped a beat, and he quickly looked away, trying not to blush. After a moment of thought, Yukari pointed out that they should try something with more protein first. She mentioned they could always come back later for shaved ice, and maybe even share one together. Naoto nodded, still feeling lightheaded from her playful gesture. A little while later, Yukari returned holding several sticks of yakitori. The vendor had given her extra, so they found a quiet place to sit on some nearby stone steps. They ate in silence for a while, enjoying the warm, flavorful food and the peaceful moment. Naoto felt incredibly lucky to be sitting there beside her. The sun was still high, but the shadows were beginning to stretch across the beach. Their meal was occasionally interrupted by people walking past them. A few guys glanced at Yukari's way and made side comments. Some even tried to talk to her, hinting that she should ditch Naoto and come hang out with him instead. Yukari tried to ignore them, but Naoto could tell it made her uncomfortable. Sensing the mood change, Naoto gently suggested they head back to their group. Without thinking much of it, he took her hand to guide her through the crowd. Yukari didn't resist at first, but after a few steps, she nervously asked him to let go. Naoto immediately did, apologizing and then complimenting her swimsuit. his words stumbling out awkwardly. He quickly added that he hoped he didn't sound weird or creepy. To his surprise, Yukari smiled and said it made her happy to hear that from him. For a moment, everything felt right again. Just then, a voice called out from nearby. Yukari turned toward the sound and recognized Fujioka, a senior from their school. He approached them casually, spoke a few kind words, and complimented her. Though the exchange was brief, something about it left Yukari uneasy. She didn't say anything at first, but her smile faded as she watched him walk away. After a few moments of silence, Yukari told Naoto that she wanted to go back to the hotel. Back at the beach, Toki began to worry. It was getting late, and Naoto and Yukari still hadn't returned. He glanced around at the others, wondering if he should go look for them. Satsuki reassured him, saying Naoto was probably just being his usual self, easily distracted. But even she glanced toward the road with a concerned look in her eyes. While Naoto was hanging out with his classmates, some of the girls mentioned that Yukari had once dated a senior named Fujioka. They said the two broke up when he graduated high school. The news left Naoto feeling a little uncomfortable, even though he tried not to show it. When he brought up to Toki, his friend suggested that instead of guessing, he should ask Yukari directly. Later that day, Naoto walked back to the hotel, feeling a little uneasy. As he approached the entrance, he spotted Fujioka looking around. Fujioka noticed him too and asked if he had seen Yukari. Naoto replied politely that Yukari had already gone back to her room and suggested Fujioka ask the hotel staff for help if needed. The two introduced themselves properly, and Fujioka even gave Naoto a small pack of snacks before walking into the hotel. Even though Fujioka seemed friendly and polite, Naoto couldn't help but feel intimidated. Fujioka had the kind of confident, charming personality that made Naoto wonder if Yukari might still have feelings for him. Just then, he heard Satsuki's voice behind him. He suddenly remembered that he had promised her they'd go swimming earlier. He quickly apologized for forgetting. Satsuki accepted his apology, then playfully took his hand and placed it on her chest, calling it a gift to cheer him up. She smiled and walked into the hotel, leaving Naoto red-faced and flustered outside. Meanwhile, Fujioka found Yukari and the two walked through the hotel's garden. As they talked, Fujioka said he wanted a fresh start and invited her to have dinner with him. Yukari agreed, though she seemed unsure. After he left, Satsuki approached Yukari and told her that Toki said their classmates would be having dinner together. She also mentioned that Naoto had been feeling confused and upset about her and Fujioka. As they talked, the two overheard some boys gossiping about Satsuki. A few said she seemed easy, but Naoto suddenly jumped in and defended her, saying people shouldn't judge her like that. Satsuki blushed at his words but didn't let Yukari know they had overheard everything. Yukari then told Satsuki she wouldn't be joining the group dinner. When Satsuki asked if it was because of Fujioka, Yukari calmly said he wasn't her boyfriend, and in fact, she had never dated anyone. She walked away, remembering how she had once turned Fujioka down in high school, though no one believed her back then. Later, as the class gathered for dinner, Satsuki informed the group that Yukari wouldn't be coming. The girls were quick to assume she was off reconnecting with Fujioka, but Satsuki told them that Yukari had denied ever dating him. Before anyone could argue, Toki came in and told the group the rest of their classmates had already gone to the restaurant. Naoto, who had overheard the conversation, became even more curious. Something about Yukari and Fujioka's past didn't feel right. At dinner, Yukari thanked Fujioka for the evening, but painful memories began to return. Even though she had turned him down, Fujioka had acted as if they were dating. People assumed they were a couple, and Yukari had been too afraid to speak up and correct them. Just before his graduation, she tried again to reject him, but he promised to wait for her and see her again one day. Now, Yukari brought up that winter day. She told him she hadn't expected him to follow through, especially since he never contacted her afterward. Fujioka explained that he wanted to wait until she finished school, but Yukari confessed she liked someone else. Fujioka then asked if that person liked only her. His words made her feel uneasy, and she suddenly got up and left the restaurant. Back at the hotel, Naoto and Satsuki hadn't joined the others for dinner. Naoto admitted he felt helpless. Soon, Fujioka walked in alone and handed them a note Yukari had left at the restaurant. She wrote that she wanted to walk back alone. After reading it, Satsuki said Yukari probably didn't like Fujioka and couldn't stand being near him anymore. Just then, Toki arrived to check on them. Naoto told him about Yukari and Toki offered to help. He tried calling her, but Fujioka said she wasn't answering. Surprisingly, Yukari picked up Toki's call. He told them she took a wrong turn, but was heading back. Then turning to Fujioka, he firmly said Yukari felt uncomfortable and asked him to leave. Fujioka agreed and left quietly. Afterward, Toki admitted he had lied. Yukari wasn't coming back yet, but he had learned where she was. He gave Naoto his phone and told him to go find her. Naoto hesitated, unsure what to say. He glanced at Satsuki, but Toki insisted he go alone. Naoto finally left to look for her. Meanwhile, Satsuki, annoyed by Naoto's uncertainty, went off to take a bath, feeling frustrated that he kept turning to her for help with his problems about another girl. While Naoto searched, he called Yukari using Toki's phone. Yukari answered, surprised to hear his voice. She told him not to worry and that she just wanted to be alone for a while. What she didn't know was that Naoto had already found her and was standing nearby. He gently asked her if she could share what she was feeling. As he spoke, Yukari finally looked up and saw him. Naoto walked closer, saying he didn't like seeing her sad. Yukari brought up Satsuki, saying she still had doubts about him dating her. She nearly slipped and revealed her true feelings to Naoto, but instead, she turned to run away. She tripped and fell, breaking the heel of her shoe. Naoto rushed over and saw that she was crying. He offered her a piggyback ride, saying he was used to carrying Suzu anyway. Embarrassed, Yukari said she was heavy, but Naoto reassured her. As he carried her back to the hotel, he asked if something about Fujioka had made her uncomfortable. Yukari asked to be put down. Once on her feet, she explained that she and Fujioka had never dated. Everyone just assumed they had, and she had been too afraid to speak up. She admitted she wanted to change and be more honest from now on. She also said she wanted to confess her feelings to the person she truly loved. Naoto, unaware she was talking about him, encouraged her to do so and promised to support her no matter what. Yukari then told him she admired him, especially after seeing how he defended Satsuki. She said she wished she had that kind of courage. She was about to confess again when suddenly, Fujioka arrived with some classmates. Shocked, Yukari hid behind Naoto, who noticed how uncomfortable she looked. He stepped forward and told everyone that Yukari had never dated Fujioka. The crowd went silent and began whispering. Fujioka smiled and claimed they were still a couple. He turned to Yukari, expecting her to agree. But this time, Yukari stood tall. She said they had never dated and that she never wanted to see him again. When Fujioka tried to grab her wrist, Satsuki appeared and kicked him away. She told him off and threatened to call the police for stalking. Fujioka panicked and left after angrily threatening to report her. Later, Yukari's friends apologized for believing Fujioka all this time. She admitted it was partly her fault too. Toki remained worried, but Yukari promised she would be stronger next time. Meanwhile, Satsuki and Naoto sat together. He brought her some rice balls, saying they had both missed dinner. As they ate, he joked about her becoming popular. But Satsuki stalked him. She said she wasn't interested in anyone else, only him. She wanted to understand why he was still kind to her even after what happened 6 years ago. Then, without warning, she kissed him. Quietly, she asked him not to be nice to her anymore, because if he was, she might end up taking something important to him again. Naoto was finally back home from his beach trip, but his conversation with Satsuki still lingered fresh in his mind. He could not shake the thought of what she had been referring to. His mind drifted back to the day before she had wrecked the garden, when she had come over to hang out. They had been sitting together, watching a romantic drama on TV. In the show, the main couple decided to run away together, and Naoto, feeling impulsive, had suggested that he and Satsuki should do the same. They had stepped out into the warm daylight and started walking through their quiet little town. The journey had been longer than they anticipated, and Naoto had eventually noticed that Satsuki's steps were slowing and her face had grown pale from fatigue. Still, she refused to admit she was tired. Instead, she asked him to take her even farther away. He had agreed, and the two had kept walking, making a promise that they would stay together no matter how far they went. Their adventure ended when the sun sank low and the street lamps flickered on. Returning home, they found Naoto's parents waiting. Since it was already late, his parents offered to drive Satsuki home, but she declined and turned to leave on her own. When Naoto called after her to say goodbye, she looked back at him, but the memory blurred in his mind. He could no longer recall the expression she had worn. He was still trying to piece it together when Suzu ran up and threw her arms around him, delighted to see him home again. They lay together on the engawa, enjoying the soft breeze and the quiet company. Suzu looked out at the overgrown garden and casually mentioned that they would clean it up the next day. Naoto wondered silently if Satsuki would come to help the way she used to. The next morning, Yukari stood before her mirror, rehearsing how she would confess her feelings to Naoto. She became flustered by her own reflection, but quickly reminded herself of the promise she had made to Satsuki, that she would finally tell him. Yet the weight of her nerves made her realize she probably wasn't ready after all. Elsewhere, Satsuki stepped out of her apartment and was startled to see Naoto standing right in front of her. He asked why she had not come to help in the garden that morning. She responded with a sharp question of her own, wanting to know if that was truly the only reason he had sought her out. Naoto faltered but insisted she should keep her promises, especially since she had been there every morning before school until now. Satsuki studied him quietly, then remarked that she had expected him to bring up the fact she had kissed him 2 days ago. She wanted to know if he had felt anything from those kisses. When he admitted that he had, she pressed further, asking if he actually liked being kissed by her. She confessed that she had always thought he harbored resentment toward her. Mayado told her that he did not hate her. He admitted that he had been upset about the garden, but more than that, he had been hurt and confused when she vanished afterward without a word. That silence had left a deeper mark than she might have realized. Satsuki's expression remained unreadable, which only frustrated him more. She reached out, gently tilting his chin upward with her fingers, and asked if he had been afraid she might disappear again because she had not shown up that morning. She tried to draw out whether he still had feelings for her, but Nayano firmly told her that whatever feelings he had once held were now in the past. Her face hardened at his words. Turning away, she said she wanted nothing more to do with him, then walked off in the opposite direction from school. As she vanished from sight, Nayado became aware of someone else's presence. Behind him, Suzu stood with a serious expression. She told him that they needed to talk after school. At school, Yukari was the first to greet Nayado, shyly asking if they could speak in private. She led him to a quiet spot and thanked him for the help he had given her during the beach trip. She had intended to confess, but before she could, several of her admirers arrived, eager for her attention. As she awkwardly waved them off, a few friends explained to Nayato that now that Yukari was confirmed to be single, she would be swamped with confessions for some time. Nayato listened but found his thoughts drifting back to the trip, remembering how his plan had been to grow closer to her. Meanwhile, Satsuki had skipped school entirely, lying on the grassy bank of a river with her eyes closed. Toki found her there and asked if she was all right. To his surprise, she spoke openly about her feelings for Nayato and admitted that part of her still hoped to get what she wanted. When he asked what that was, she gave an answer meant only for his ears. His eyes widened in shock. She added that Nayato could never understand it, nor even Toki himself. But Toki quietly told her that he thought he understood at least some part of it. Later, Nayato spotted Satsuki arriving at school with Toki, and the sight caught him off guard. He wondered if something was going on between them. Even though she had once claimed she wasn't interested in Toki, the image stayed in his mind. Yukari called out to him, but he didn't hear, and she watched him walk away with a deflated look. By the end of the day, Yukari had gathered her courage again. She approached Nayato and asked if he would walk home with her. But just then, the school announcement summoned her club to clean the pool, and she remembered her obligation. Nayato sensed that Yukari was not quite herself. Later, he stumbled upon her in the boys' locker room, changing clothes. Before he could speak, he noticed a group of boys heading their way and quickly stepped inside, closing the door behind him. Yukari fumbled for words, flustered and embarrassed. Nayato realized she was in the wrong changing room and told her so. When the realization hit her, she froze in mortification. Nayato tried to buy Yukari some time by holding the door shut as the boys outside tried to force their way in. After a while, they gave up and decided to change near the pool instead. Yukari collapsed to the ground, relieved but also humiliated by what had just happened. Nayato crouched to check on her, but quickly turned away when he realized her state of undress. Before he could leave, she stopped him and asked him to keep his back turned. While changing, she began speaking about their first meeting, noting how it strangely resembled the situation now. When she finished dressing, she walked toward him with her feelings ready to be voiced. But at that exact moment, the door swung open and Nayato stumbled forward, falling on top of her. He quickly apologized, but before she could lose her nerve, she blurted out her confession. Then, flustered, she stood and ran off, leaving him stunned and unable to process what had happened. Later, as Nayato walked toward the school gates, he found Yukari waiting. He awkwardly greeted her, still unaware of what her earlier words meant. Her confusion deepened when he didn't react to her feelings, and only then did Nayato realize what she had said back in the changing room. Embarrassed, she told him he didn't need to answer right away before turning to run, only to bump into a wall. Forcing a small smile, she reassured him she was fine and hurried off again, leaving him standing there in shock, realizing his crush. When Nayato arrived home, Suzu was waiting. She asked if anything had happened at school, but he claimed nothing had. Changing the subject, she asked if things were all right between him and Satsuki. Nayato grimaced, remembering Satsuki telling him she wanted nothing to do with him. Suzu gently suggested she didn't believe Satsuki truly hated him, adding that she had grown fond of the girl as well. She handed him a bag of cherry tomatoes and encouraged him to visit Satsuki and make amends. Later, Nayato went to Satsuki's apartment, wondering if she was home. The door was unlocked, and inside he found a nearly empty unit. The place felt cold and lifeless, hardly a home at all. He wondered how her parents could leave her in such conditions. The memory of her sad smile before their fallout came back to him, making him wonder if things could have been different had he spoken up sooner. While looking around, he spotted a calendar on the wall. Scrawled notes revealed she had a part-time job, and the day's entry showed she would be handing out flyers at the station. He went there, and just as expected, found her among the crowd promoting a Chinese restaurant. She was dressed in a cuter outfit than usual, attracting the attention of a nearby group of men. Nayato felt awkward and flustered when she noticed him, and after a cold glare, she walked toward a mascot character, then back to him. Before they could speak further, her boss rushed over in a panic, explaining that the person inside the mascot costume had collapsed from the heat. Spotting Nayato, the boss pleaded for him to step in. Soon, Nayato was wearing the stifling panda suit, standing beside Satsuki. His attempt to keep up appearances was interrupted when a group of children knocked him over, causing Satsuki to lose her balance too. She looked irritated, but they continued working. Despite the awkward start, Nayato became surprisingly popular with younger girls, charming the crowd while keeping a close eye on men who got too close to Satsuki. When their shift ended, her boss thanked Nayato for helping. Tired but satisfied, Nayato realized the day had turned out better than expected, even earning him enough money to buy Suzu a small gift. As he prepared to leave, Satsuki asked how he had found her, and he admitted to visiting her apartment and seeing the calendar. She scolded him for trespassing, but quickly dropped the matter. When he suggested she fix her door, she dismissed it, saying no one cared about her anyway. Frustrated, Nayato told her that he cared because she was his childhood friend, and that alone made her important to him. His words stopped her in her tracks. She turned to him with a smile, asking if it was really all right for her to be around him again now that he remembered their past. Though slightly puzzled by her sudden change in mood, he agreed. Back at her apartment, he mentioned leaving the cherry tomatoes from Suzu in her fridge. As he was leaving, she casually asked whether Yukari had confessed. Nayato froze, unsure how to respond, and instead of dismissing her, admitted he wasn't sure what to say. While happy to be liked by someone he cared for, he feared disappointing her. Satsuki told him it was fine to take his time as no one had the right to rush or judge his feelings. The next morning, Nayato woke early with his mind still heavy from the day before. He had turned Yukari's confession over and over in his head until sleep finally claimed him, and now, standing outside the school gates, he realized there was no avoiding it anymore. Yukari was waiting for him, just as nervous as he was. When he greeted her, she tilted her head. Nayato took a breath and forced the words out. He told her that he had been surprised by her confession and apologized immediately, which only deepened the crease of worry on her face. She thought he was rejecting her, and her heart fell. But Nayato quickly explained. He wasn't turning her down. He was apologizing because he was afraid. He admitted that while he liked her, he feared that she would eventually grow disappointed in him. He wasn't confident in himself, and he had so many things to handle, exams, finding a job, looking after Suzu, that he didn't know if he could give her what she deserved. For now, he needed more time. But Yukari shook her head. She refused to wait in silence. She told him that she didn't want anyone else, only him. If he truly didn't like her, she would have accepted rejection, but since he admitted he had feelings for her, she wouldn't allow his doubts to become the wall between them. Boldly, she suggested they try dating until summer break, like a trial period. If Nayato felt uncomfortable, they could end it without regrets. The idea unsettled him. To Nayato, it sounded too much like an experiment, as if their relationship wasn't real. But Yukari pressed on, her eyes pleading. She didn't care if it was temporary, she just wanted to stay connected to him. Unable to refuse her determination, Nayato finally agreed, though unease lingered in his chest. After school, Nayato met Toki to talk things over. His friend wasted no time asking why he hadn't simply accepted Yukari's confession properly instead of agreeing to a strange trial period. Nayato admitted that he liked her, but his fear of disappointing her held him back. He explained that he wanted to take his future seriously first. He was planning to start a part-time job to help Suzu and himself become independent from their aunt. He also wanted to build enough confidence so he could stand by Yukari without shame. Toki listened quietly before reminding him that technicalities aside, he was now dating Yukari. The thought made Nayato's chest tighten strangely. His eyes softened, and in a dreamlike voice, he admitted that despite his worries, he was incredibly happy. Toki chuckled, telling him that if he ever had questions about working part-time or about dating, he could always come to him. Their conversation was cut short when Satsuki suddenly appeared in her waitress uniform, clearly surprised to overhear that Nayato had agreed to date Yukari. Nayato braced for her scolding, but to his shock, she simply congratulated him. You could hardly believe her reaction. Toki teased her about the outfit, and Satsuki snapped at Nayato, demanding to know if he had come to the cafe just to make fun of her. He quickly explained he was actually here for a job interview. To his surprise, Satsuki revealed that it was her last day since she would be switching jobs soon. Before they could talk further, one of the staff scolded Satsuki for lingering too long with her friends. Nayato excused himself, telling them he would let them know how the interview went. As he left, Toki glanced carefully at Satsuki and asked if she was really okay. She smiled faintly and told him she was fine. After all, she was secure in her role as Nayato's childhood friend. Nayato met with the cafe manager, who explained that one more applicant had to be interviewed before him. He was asked to wait in the holding room. When he entered, he found a girl asleep in a chair. Her uniform wasn't one he recognized, but something about her face felt familiar. Curious, he leaned a little closer, trying to place where he had seen her before. Suddenly, the girl stirred awake, and both of them screamed in surprise. Without hesitation, she accused him of trying to kiss her. Flustered, Nayato waved his hands, insisting he hadn't done anything of the sort. He had only been trying to recognize her face. At that moment, the manager entered, finding the commotion suspicious. The girl immediately pointed at Nayato, claiming he had tried to take advantage of her. Nayato protested desperately, repeating his explanation. Exasperated, the manager decided to separate them and hear each side of the story privately. As she left, the girl's eyes caught his resume on the table. She read his name softly herself as if curious. Later, Nayato eventually finished his interview, though his heart was heavy with the thought that the misunderstanding might have doomed his chances. He walked slowly toward the station, his thoughts tangled, when he heard a familiar voice call out. Yukari was there, breathless from chasing after him. Nayato apologized for being so hard to reach lately and promised that once he saved enough money, he would buy a smartphone to make things easier. Yukari brightened instantly and suggested they go somewhere together the next day. She wanted a proper date before exam season began. The following afternoon, Suzu's expression clouded when she saw Yukari with them. She still didn't know about their relationship. Nayato reassured Yukari that he would tell his sister soon, but promised to do it at the right time. Yukari then introduced herself to Suzu. Suzu admitted Yukari was very pretty, but quickly warned her not to think she could win her over with sweetness. Yukari simply smiled and said she hoped they could have fun together. Unbeknownst to them, Toki and Satsuki were hiding nearby, spying. Toki whispered that Nayato had made a questionable choice, bringing his little sister on his first real date. Satsuki said nothing, only continued watching as though she couldn't look away. Inside the zoo, Suzu's excitement erased any awkwardness. She ran from exhibit to exhibit, her laughter echoing in the air. Nayato let her ride on his shoulder so she could see the monkeys better, and she beamed with delight. Then, with childish mischief, she suggested Yukari take a turn on his shoulders too, before dashing off to the next animal. At the petting zoo, Suzu became fascinated by a goat's beard while Nayato apologized to Yukari for the hectic day. She reassured him warmly, saying she was having a wonderful time. When Suzu later grew hungry, Yukari nervously revealed she had packed in a lunch. Nayato stiffened at the memory of her earlier attempts at cooking, but to his surprise, everything looked neat and appetizing. Suzu eagerly dug in, declaring it delicious. Yukari admitted her mother had helped, which eased Nayato's nerves. After trying some himself, he was pleasantly surprised by the flavor. He promised that next time, he would be the one to bring food for them to share. Not far away, Satsuki and Toki continued their quiet watch. Toki suggested they get lunch too, but Satsuki refused to leave. She admitted she didn't even know why she was still following them. Toki sighed, sensing the conflict she couldn't voice. Later, Suzu dozed off from exhaustion, and Nayato carefully held her while Yukari offered to clean up. Watching her work so thoughtfully stirred something inside him. For a fleeting moment, he wondered if he truly deserved someone like her. To distract himself, he told her that once he landed a job, he wanted to save enough to take her somewhere special during summer break. Yukari lowered her gaze, then whispered that she didn't need anywhere special. She was happy as long as she was with him. She added softly that she didn't mind if Suzu came along too. Their hands edged closer until their fingers finally brushed, but Suzu stirred awake, breaking the spell. After Suzu used the restroom, they unexpectedly ran into Toki and Satsuki. Caught off guard, Nayato demanded to know why they were there. Satsuki admitted they had followed him out of concern. She apologized to Yukari for intruding, then offered to take Suzu for ice cream. The girl happily agreed, leaving Nayato and Yukari alone at last. The zoo grew quieter as they walked side by side. Nayato glanced at a couple holding hands nearby, hesitated, then tried to reach out. He almost withdrew, but Yukari shyly caught his thumb, guiding his hand into hers. That evening, Nayato lay in bed, staring at his hand in disbelief. He couldn't stop smiling. For the first time, he felt he had taken a step forward. He promised himself he would do his best at work and study hard so that he could ask Yukari out properly without hesitation. Yukari, too, was happy with their progress, though a shadow lingered in her heart. She couldn't forget that Nayato and Satsuki had once kissed. Days passed, and as exams loomed, students buried themselves in review. Still, every time Nayato's eyes met Yukari's across the classroom, he couldn't help but smile. One afternoon, Yukari left school earlier than usual. Some boys teased Nayato, asking about his relationship with her, but he dodged their questions carefully. Meanwhile, Yukari stood in a convenience store aisle, staring silently at a package of protection. After a long pause, she left with a faint smile, her thoughts drifting toward the summer break that was fast approaching. At the school gates, a familiar face appeared once again, the same girl from the cafe interview. She drew stares from passing students, and a group of boys tried to get her attention. With a playful tilt of her head, she introduced herself as Makina and asked them to call Nayato out to meet her. That morning by the lockers, Nayato is chatting with Satsuki. She's curious about his recent job interview and presses him for details. Before he can properly answer, Yukari suddenly shows up and tries inviting him to join her study group. But Nayato doesn't get the chance to respond because another student rushes over saying someone is asking for him outside the window. When Nayato looks, he sees a familiar girl smiling and waving. She calls out to him brightly, "Senpai." The nearby boys recognize her and tell Nayato that the girl, Makina, is someone from his middle school days. At the mention of her name, Nayato's memory sparks. He suddenly remembers who she is. The group escorts her to the cafeteria where Makina introduces herself properly. She explains she used to be on the track team with Nayato in middle school. Now she attends Solarina's academy for girls on an athletic scholarship, chasing track more seriously. One of the boys reacts with amazement, saying Solarina is famous for its sports program. Nayato quickly clarifies he was never serious about the track team. He only joined on paper because his old school required everyone to have a club and he rarely showed up to practice. But even so, he remembers Makina. She had been popular, well-liked, and very noticeable. Excited by her presence, the boys start asking to take pictures with her, and Makina happily agrees. Nayato watches them with a bit of unease, wondering if girls really do become more showy at this age. His eyes drift suspiciously towards Satsuki, half expecting her to behave the same way. Then Makina drops a surprise. She and Nayato both got the restaurant job. The boss told her, but since Nayato doesn't have a smartphone, there was no way to contact him. So she came to find him herself. Satsuki congratulates him warmly, and Nayato beams with relief and happiness at finally landing work. For a brief second, Makina's smile falters, but she quickly recovers, tugging Nayato to his feet. She suggests they go shopping for a smartphone together. Nayato hesitates, but Makina teases him, asking if maybe he already has a girlfriend. Before he can say anything, the guys cut in loudly, joking that there's no way Nayato could possibly have one. Makina takes the lead and pulls him out of the building, leaving Nayato no choice but to follow along. Back inside, Yukari looks unsettled. Satsuki reassures her, insisting Nayato isn't the type to cheat and pointing out that he couldn't possibly admit to having a girlfriend in front of everyone. Meanwhile, Nayato and Makina walk through town. Out of nowhere, she asks why he tried to kiss her the other day. Nayato denies it immediately, saying he only leaned in because she seemed familiar and he wanted a closer look. Makina laughs and shifts the subject, fishing for a compliment. She asks if he thinks she's cuter than before. He hesitantly agrees, though in his mind he thinks she sounds a bit conceited. To change the mood, he compliments her instead on getting into such a prestigious school and excelling in track. He also admits he's surprised she still remembers him, since back in middle school they barely interacted at practice. A short while later, Nayato is holding his brand new phone. Makina offers to be his first contact, but he's already typing in Yukari's number. On the other end, Yukari sees an unknown number calling. Curious, she picks up, and her heart leaps when she hears Nayato's voice. He tells her he finally has a phone and wanted her to be the very first person he called. When the call ends, Yukari squeals happily, thrilled beyond words. But Makina notices. She stares at Nayato accusingly and demands to know who he just called. Flustered, he admits it was his girlfriend but explains he couldn't say so earlier in front of everyone. Makina immediately asks if Satsuki is that girlfriend, but Nayato denies it flatly. He doesn't reveal who she really is. Instead, he politely thanks Makina for helping him buy the phone. To her surprise, he looks genuinely happy, which leaves her quietly unsettled. Later that day, Makina returns to her academy. Her coach scolds her for skipping practice and reminds her of her upcoming summer training. Makina counters by saying she's taking a part-time job. A few girls overhear and gossip that Makina still hasn't posted any impressive time since joining the school. Back in her room, Makina lies silently, mulling over what she learned. Nayato already has a girlfriend. But instead of backing off, she smiles to herself. She decides it might be fun to break them up so she can enjoy Nayato's company whenever she feels bored. The next day, Nayato enjoys a good harvest in his garden. Satsuki drops by and happily eats the fresh vegetables. Watching her, Nayato comments that she looks thinner lately. Satsuki just laughs it off, joking that at least her chest is still in proportion. Suzu interrupts, reminding Nayato about his work shift. Panicked, he dashes off to the restaurant. At work, Makina is already complaining about the kitchen uniforms, saying they aren't nearly as cute as the waitress's outfits. Throughout the shift, she keeps trying to distract Nayato, offering to hang out, even trying to act flirty. Nayato rejects her every time, scolding her when she goes too far. He tells her firmly to fix her clothes and be professional. Their boss overhears and immediately scolds Makina for wearing her uniform incorrectly. Embarrassed, she realizes none of her efforts to stand out have succeeded. Later, she struggles to tie her messy hair. Seeing this, Nayato offers to help, carefully tying it back. He explains he used to do his little sister's hair every morning. Hearing this, Makina suddenly realizes maybe Naoto sees her as a younger sister too, since she's younger than him. But then Naoto lightly scolds her, saying that by high school she should already know how to manage her own hair. He quickly softens his words, adding that he knows she's capable because she's always been amazing as long as he can remember. With renewed energy, Makina snaps into focus and works hard for the rest of her shift. She even earns praise from the boss. Naoto tries to congratulate her, but she brushes him off. In the locker room afterward, she reflects on the day. She had planned to do the bare minimum, but instead found herself actually working hard, and the praise felt surprisingly good. Then she notices someone else in the room. Satsuki. Casually, Satsuki cups Makina's chest and remarks that Naoto prefers bigger ones. Before Makina can react, Satsuki leaves, leaving her stunned and confused. Later, Naoto is waiting near the spot where he's supposed to meet Yukari when Makina suddenly rushes up. Makina suddenly told Naoto to break up with Satsuki. Surprised, he repeated that Satsuki wasn't his girlfriend. But Makina pointed across the street where Satsuki was walking. Remembering that Satsuki had mentioned changing jobs, Naoto ran after her with Makina following. They ended up in a street lined with bars and cosplay signs. Embarrassed by the place, Naoto tried to send Makina home, but she refused. Just then, Makina's track captain spotted them and scolded her for being with a boy there. She even suggested Naoto was the reason Makina had skipped practice. Red-faced, Makina dragged her captain away. Checking the time, Naoto realized he was late for his date with Yukari. He pushed his worries aside and hurried off. On their date, Yukari asked about his job. Naoto explained he worked with Makina but only thought of her as a younger sister. Relieved, Yukari walked with him until they reached her home. Shyly, she said she wanted him to visit someday once she improved her cooking. Naoto promised, though his thoughts kept returning to Satsuki. Later, Naoto visited Satsuki's apartment to check on her. He worried she might be working somewhere unsafe. Touched by his concern, she dodged his questions and instead massaged his tired feet, saying she had felt the same when she started working. Without warning, Satsuki grabbed Naoto's foot and began massaging it. Naoto was confused, briefly wondering if this had to do with her secret job. When she pressed too hard and hurt him, she quickly apologized and tried again more gently. As her hands moved higher up his legs, Naoto grew nervous. He looked away, trying to ignore the tension, until she reached too close to his thighs. Finally, he told her to stop, reminding her that he was already committed to Yukari. Satsuki said she didn't fully understand the limits between them but promised not to cross a line that would ruin their bond. Still, she asked quietly when childhood friends stopped being just friends. Naoto didn't know how to answer, until his phone buzzed with a message from Yukari. The moment broke and Satsuki pulled back, apologizing and saying she was only joking. She then showed him a flyer, explaining she worked at a steakhouse with good pay, and that the alley he saw her in earlier was just a shortcut. Relieved, Naoto felt calmer. Satsuki smiled, saying her family was fine, but she preferred not to contact them. Their talk ended when Naoto's phone rang again. It was Makina. She asked if he would be her boyfriend for the weekend fireworks. Naoto refused, but the next day Makina sulked. She pleaded that she had already told everyone she would be going with her boyfriend. Naoto suggested she ask Toki instead. Makina hesitated, then asked if Naoto was going with his own girlfriend. He avoided the question, saying he'd just be on break. The next day, Toki texted Naoto, telling him he should invite Yukari to the fireworks. It would surely make her happy. Encouraged, Naoto didn't hesitate. He picked up the phone and called her right away. But to his disappointment, Yukari already had plans. She was going to watch the fireworks with her old hometown friends. Yet, in a quiet, almost whispering voice, she admitted something else. She said she would actually prefer it if it could be just the two of them. Maybe the week after or even later. Her words were so soft, Naoto barely caught them, and instead of repeating herself, she simply apologized for turning him down. Feeling let down, Naoto turned to his little sister Suzu. Maybe she would want to go. But when he asked, Suzu shook her head. She already had plans to watch with a friend. She even suggested Naoto tag along and maybe he could invite Satsuki too. Naoto wasn't eager about that, but then Suzu remembered Satsuki had work that day anyway. So in the end, Naoto agreed to join Suzu and her friend since he had no better option. That night, he texted Yukari and let her know. She replied warmly, saying it was fine, and then suggested they could still meet during the festival, even if only for a little while. She was sure she could slip away from her friends. The thought of seeing her, even briefly, made Naoto's heart race, so they agreed to meet at the shrine around 7. The day of the festival arrived. Suzu introduced her friend, a cheerful girl named Rinin, who complimented Suzu's outfit. Suzu laughed, admitting she had wanted to wear a yukata but gave up because it was too hard to walk in. Hearing that, Nayato realized Yukari might actually wear one that evening. But then his phone buzzed, a message from Toki. Alarmed, Nayato quickly called and Toki explained that things had been fine at first, but suddenly Makina bolted toward the shrine without warning. Nayato paled at the news, already worried about trouble. Turning to Suzu, he apologized, saying he had to take care of something urgent, and dashed off toward the shrine. There he found Makina, clearly flustered. She admitted Toki's mature personality had completely caught her off guard. Nayato was surprised, weren't she used to dealing with boys? But Makina shook her head. Toki was different. He felt overwhelming in a way she wasn't prepared for. She confessed being alone with him was new and unfamiliar before quickly catching herself and insisting she be fine with someone like Nayato instead. She explained Toki had gone straight to complimenting her yukata, and only then did Nayato notice she really was wearing one. Suddenly, Makina turned to him, declaring Nayato was the exact type of boy she was used to handling, and demanded he become her pretend boyfriend. Nayato immediately refused, reminding her he already had a girlfriend to meet. But Makina pushed harder, saying she wanted to tag along so she could finally see this girlfriend for herself. Their bickering drew the attention of two guys who swaggered over, trying to convince Makina to ditch Nayato and watch the fireworks with them instead. Both Nayato and Makina tried to make excuses, but the men pressed closer. Nayato realized things could get messy, so he quietly told Makina to follow his signal, and when he shouted for her to run, she had to run. Then, in one sharp move, Nayato gave the signal. Makina sprinted forward with such speed it startled everyone. Even Nayato was surprised before chasing after her. He finally caught up with her by the shrine, but instead of being thankful, Makina fumed. She scolded him for making her run, insisting he should have fought for her. Nayato stood firm. Running was smarter. Fighting would only escalated things and caused more trouble. He said he'd have told his girlfriend the same, and Makina pressed further. And what if running wasn't an option? Nayato answered without hesitation. If escape was impossible, then he'd do whatever it takes to protect the person important to him. His words made Makina's cheeks flush. She asked softly if she was someone he'd protect too. But before Nayato could respond, the first firework lit up the sky, stealing his attention. When he turned back, Makina refused to repeat her question, hiding her embarrassment. Nayato then remembered he had to meet Yukari. He spoke her name, and Makina immediately caught it. Yukari was his girlfriend. Determined, Makina said she wanted to meet her, convinced Yukari couldn't be that pretty. But right then, Yukari appeared, walking toward them. The moment Makina saw her, she felt an unexpected pang in her chest. Nayato introduced them, but Makina quickly excused herself, saying she needed to return to her team. Nayato worried about leaving her without a fake boyfriend, but she waved it off. She dashed away, unsettled by why it bothered her so much that Yukari was beautiful. When her captain later caught her hand, Makina finally realized the truth. She had feelings for Nayato. Meanwhile, Nayato rejoined Yukari. They rode the train together, and Yukari admitted she wanted more time with just him. When they left the station, rain began to fall. They ducked under a roof, and when it seemed light enough, Yukari suggested they hurry home. But she forgot about her yukata and tripped, only to be caught by Nayato. He suggested they hold hands so she wouldn't stumble again. Flustered but pleased, Yukari agreed. As they walked, the drizzle turned into a heavy downpour with strong winds. Nayato decided it was too risky to continue and led her toward his house, the closest place to wait it out. But as they approached, they spotted Satsuki standing outside, covering the vegetables and putting away Suzu's planters. She explained she was just about to leave, but the worsening rain made Nayato insist she come inside with them. Once inside, Nayato thought about informing Aunt Tameo, but her door was plastered with "Do Not Disturb" signs. He decided to wait until morning. He returned to the girls and suggested they bathe first while he found clothes for them. Yukari blushed at the thought of being in Nayato's house, especially with Satsuki there. Satsuki went to bathe first. In the bath, she couldn't help but notice how much larger Yukari's chest was compared to hers, leaving Yukari embarrassed. As they soaked, Yukari asked why Satsuki spent so much time at Nayato's house. Satsuki explained she helped Suzu with the garden and told Yukari she didn't need to worry. Yukari tried to deny her jealousy, but Satsuki's sharp gaze made her admit it. To ease her mind, Satsuki told Yukari that Nayato genuinely looked happy when he was with her. She reassured her that she and Nayato were only childhood friends, and she had no intention of ruining that bond. But Yukari sensed there was more behind her words. She pressed for the truth, yet Satsuki insisted she was fine as long as Nayato was happy. With that, she left Yukari alone in the bath. Later, Nayato got a text from Suzu's friend saying Suzu wouldn't be coming home that night. Satsuki teased him, joking he would have to spend the night with both girls, even suggesting he and Yukari should make out. The teasing left them red-faced. That night, Nayato sat by his door, staring at the planters, thinking about Yukari. Just as he lay down, his phone buzzed again. Suzu reminding him to bring the planters inside. Then he heard a voice. Expecting Yukari, he turned only to see Satsuki. She teased him lightly before turning to leave, but Naoto thanked her sincerely for coming all that way in the storm. Though she brushed it off, her fluster showed before she slipped back to her room. Later, Yukari couldn't sleep. She slipped quietly into Naoto's room and found him already asleep. Seeing him, she thought this might be her chance to kiss him. But just before her lips touched his, Naoto murmured in his sleep Suzu's name. Yukari froze. It didn't feel right anymore. She turned to leave, but Naoto stirred awake. Groggy, he mistook her for Satsuki and scolded her before realizing it was Yukari. Embarrassed, she admitted she couldn't sleep. The mood grew heavier when she mentioned he had called out Satsuki's name. Naoto panicked, scrambling for an excuse, but Yukari suddenly pressed him. She said if he did something with her now, maybe it would stop him from thinking about Satsuki, especially before Satsuki realized her own feelings. Naoto assumed she meant a kiss. He wrestled with himself, then closed his eyes and leaned in. But Yukari stood suddenly, surprising him, and then lay down on his bed. Naoto noticed she wasn't wearing pants. His mind spun when had she become so bold. He moved closer, intending to kiss her, but she interrupted again. She asked if it was all right to go all the way since her period had just ended. Naoto froze, realizing she hadn't meant just kissing. She quietly asked if it was okay to go only part of the way. Her trembling hand squeezed his as she admitted she felt safe with him, that he was different from other guys. Her words stirred something deep inside him. But slowly, Naoto let go of her hand and sat back. He explained gently that rushing into something like that wasn't right. For a moment, Yukari's face twisted with hurt, then she suddenly ran out. Left alone, Naoto convinced himself he had made the right choice. Their relationship mattered more than giving into the moment, yet a hollow feeling lingered as if he had missed something important. Back in the girl's room, Yukari hid under the blanket, cheeks burning, tears slipping down her face. Satsuki, still awake, heard her crying. She looked toward the sound and quietly thought to herself, calling Naoto stupid for wasting a once-in-a-lifetime chance. The next morning, Naoto was at the sink washing his face, still lost in his own thoughts. He checked his phone, but strangely, there was no new message. Usually, Yukari would reply instantly, but this time his screen stayed silent. Meanwhile, Satsuki was also awake. She told Naoto that she was heading back to her home. Curious, Naoto asked why, but before she could explain, he said he would tag along since he also had morning duty that day. Soon, the two of them arrived at the new station together. While walking, Naoto hesitated before asking if he could pose a question. Satsuki smiled and told him to go ahead. Gathering his courage, Naoto asked if Yukari had said anything to her last night. Satsuki shook her head, answering calmly that no, Yukari hadn't said a word. But then she added something teasing. She was glad Naoto had managed to restrain himself last night. Hearing that, Naoto blushed furiously and asked how she even knew. Satsuki smirked and explained that she had been in the room right next to his, so of course she heard. Then she turned serious, pointing out that if he had done anything reckless without protection, things could have gotten really messy. Embarrassed, Naoto begged her to stop saying these things out loud. But Satsuki wasn't done. She warned him that if he kept handling Yukari the same way, things between them might spiral into something much worse. Hearing this, Naoto realized with a heavy heart that she was right. He had already made mistakes. Later, the scene shifted to Naoto finally reporting for his duty. Even while working, he kept messaging Yukari. But no matter how many times he sent something, there was still no reply. His mind ran wild. Usually she responded instantly. So was she that angry at him now? Just as his frustration built, a new notification popped up. He rushed to check, thinking it was her at last. But no, this time it was from his little sister, Suzu. He groaned in disappointment. While sweeping the floor at work, he suddenly heard Makina's cheerful voice greeting him. She teased him, saying that although he looked better, his face didn't really show it. Naoto brushed her off, grumbling that he wasn't feeling well and didn't want to be disturbed. Makina tilted her head, wondering what was wrong. She guessed maybe he and Yukari had spent time together last night after the festival, especially since it had rained. Her assumptions annoyed Naoto, and he snapped, asking why she even cared. It wasn't any of her business, so she shouldn't get involved. His sharp words made Makina shrink back, visibly hurt. Realizing he had gone too far, Naoto quickly apologized, admitting he shouldn't have raised his voice like that. Before things got more awkward, their boss entered, holding 2 movie tickets in his hand. With a friendly smile, he explained that since Naoto had a younger sister, he thought they could use these tickets to enjoy an animated movie. He handed one to Naoto and one to Makina before leaving. Not long after, Makina returned the ticket to Naoto, saying she wasn't interested in going. She tried to walk away, but Naoto stopped her and suggested that she come with him to watch the movie tomorrow instead. Surprised but unable to refuse, Makina agreed. Meanwhile, the focus shifted to Yukari. She was sitting alone staring at Naoto's messages on her phone. A pang of guilt washed over her. She regretted how things had gone and even wondered if Naoto might break up with her. Just then, Toki appeared at the library. He greeted her warmly, saying he liked studying there during the summer too. Yukari smiled faintly but grew nervous when he asked if things were okay between her and Naoto. She admitted softly that she wasn't sure. Toki asked more and she confessed her worries. He tried to lighten the mood by teasing her about her clothing, wondering if she didn't feel the heat in such attire. Later, the two of them sat in a cafe together, where Toki encouraged her to talk about everything troubling her. She finally opened up and shared her side of the story. After hearing her out, Toki reassured her. He told her not to worry. Naoto wasn't the type to abandon her over something so small. If she ever felt insecure, she should talk it out rather than bottling it up. Then he gently asked if there was still something else weighing on her. Yukari admitted there was. She feared that Satsuki might steal Naoto away from her. That revelation struck Toki. He hadn't realized how deep her insecurity ran. But now it made sense. He reminded her again that Naoto cared for her, and she thanked him sincerely for motivating her. With renewed determination, she left, telling herself she would try her best to hold onto Naoto. The next day, Naoto, Makina, Suzu, and Suzu's friend all went to the theater with the tickets. Makina was surprised at how young Suzu looked, even teasing that she hadn't expected Naoto's sister to be so little. As the movie was about to begin, Naoto found himself distracted, still waiting for a message from Yukari. Makina leaned over, asking what he was thinking and even questioning if he was cheating on Yukari by bringing her to the movies. Naoto brushed it off, saying he had just brought his sister and friend along, nothing more. Later, as the movie began, Naoto dozed off during the film. Far away, Yukari was desperately calling his phone, trying to apologize. But since his phone was on silent, he didn't notice. Convinced that everything between them was over, Yukari sank deeper into despair. When Naoto finally checked his phone later, he immediately messaged Yukari, apologizing. He explained that he had been at the movie theater and hadn't seen her calls. Relieved, Yukari smiled, but her relief quickly turned bittersweet when she noticed he had mentioned being at the theater. Her heart sank, imagining that he might have gone there with Satsuki. Later that day, Makina showed up in a different dress, catching Naoto off guard. He even imagined Satsuki wearing something similar, which left him a little flustered. Their boss dismissed them early from work, and Makina ended up following Naoto afterward. When he noticed, he asked why she was trailing him. She denied it, pretending it was just a coincidence. Then Yukari suddenly appeared. She greeted Naoto, saying she would come meet him again after school. Naoto agreed, but there was still an awkward tension between them. After she left, Makina boldly stepped in and asked Yukari if she could borrow Naoto for a while. Yukari hesitated but agreed, adding that Naoto only thought of Makina as a younger sister anyway. Soon after, Naoto found himself helping Makina carry shopping bags as she tried on several outfits. Eventually, she stepped out in a cute dress and asked if she should buy it. He nodded tiredly, saying it looked fine. Then, out of nowhere, she confided in him. She had a crush on someone. Naoto encouraged her to confess, explaining that if the guy truly liked her, he would understand. Their conversation continued later in a restaurant, where, to their surprise, Satsuki was working. Her outfit stunned both Naoto and Makina. Satsuki teased Naoto mercilessly, accusing him of cheating on Yukari. Embarrassed, Naoto denied it, but Satsuki clearly enjoyed watching him squirm. Afterward, Makina grew bolder. She suddenly sat on Naoto's lap, asking if he could press her chest to help it grow. Shocked, Naoto pushed her away, telling her she was being ridiculous. He reminded her that true love wasn't about such things. It was about trust and patience. He openly admitted that he loved Yukari deeply, and that even if they fought, they would always work it out. Unbeknownst to him, Yukari had arrived and overheard his words. When Makina stormed out in frustration, Yukari stepped forward. She asked Naoto to repeat what he had just said. He turned to her, smiled shyly, and told her again that he loved her. Relief washed over her, and the two finally reconciled. That evening, they walked home together. Yukari apologized for how she had acted before, admitting she might have been too hasty. Naoto agreed that things had been awkward, but he didn't mind. She laughed softly, promising to do better next time. Then she opened up about her dreams for the future: college, a career, financial independence. Naoto listened, suddenly realizing how seriously she was planning her life compared to his own aimless attitude. Eventually, they parted ways, and Naoto remembered he still carried Makina's luggage. That night, Makina was running outside, her mind swirling with worries. She remembered her friend had warned her. If she skipped training next week, the coach might expel her. She thought about it for a moment, and even though it meant she might never see Naoto again, she told herself she could live with it. After all, she wasn't his first choice, and trying so hard when she knew she couldn't be number one just felt exhausting. But when she finally arrived at her dormitory, she was surprised to see Naoto waiting for her. He told her he'd been waiting forever, had come to return the shopping bag she'd forgotten, and then he left in a hurry. Watching him go, Makina felt her heart sink. Suddenly, she realized she had truly fallen for him. Determined, she promised herself she would keep chasing him no matter what. The next morning, she even went to Naoto's house and asked Suzu where he might be. Suzu eyed her suspiciously and warned her to stop chasing after her brother. He wasn't going to fall for her. But Makina only smiled, telling Suzu not to underestimate her. She was ready to do whatever it took to win Naoto's heart. That marks the end of today's anime recap. If you enjoyed the video and want more of it, please support the channel by leaving a like and subscribe. Let's help us reach a current goal of 10K subscribers.